This is going to be an extension of the video that I made for That Guy T, titled Feminism, It's Okay When We Do It. I'm going to detail a few other instances of feminist hypocrisy, the way they've arranged the playing field, a couple of the theories that they hold to, and why it's complete horseshit. Remember everyone, third wave feminism is about equality. We are all aware at this point what modern third wave feminism is based on. The idea that men are the oppressors and women are the oppressed. Already they have set up some kind of a bourgeoisie versus the proletariat class warfare type thing. However, rich, wealthy, and successful women are still locked inside of that proletariat box, while homeless men are considered members of the bourgeoisie privileged class. This just displays third-wave feminists' complete lack of attention to monetary privilege. The idea that a homeless man has more inherent privilege than a rich woman is absolutely preposterous. When one brings up monetary privilege when comparing successful women to poor men, or successful black men to poor white men, one is derided for not getting it. The rationalization for this is the idea that just because someone isn't successful in the system designed for them, doesn't mean that it wasn't designed for them. And just because someone is successful in a system not designed for them, that doesn't mean that it isn't rigged against them. The reason this is difficult to convince feminists out of is because even if the system operates completely opposite to the way feminists think it operates, there's already a pre-made assumption in there that the system is rigged against women. There are plenty of successful women who were successful due to their hard work and perseverance. Then that means there is no metaphorical glass ceiling keeping women from achieving their goals because, check it out, a woman achieved it. That doesn't matter, however, their theory already has rationalizations for both situations. If there are hardly any successful women, then it's obvious that the system is stacked against them. If there are plenty of successful women, which there are, then yeah, sure, they are successful, but that doesn't mean that the system isn't stacked against them. Reality could operate opposite to what they think, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that we focus on the fact that women are oppressed. In fact, women being successful can even be construed as a form of female oppression. Women are oppressed because they aren't successful, and there's rampant sexism. Women are oppressed because they are successful because they get benefits from merely being a woman, and there is still rampant sexism. Try and start asking feminists how we escape this theory. I'm sure that the answer will consist of parroting their untrue propaganda, supporting everything that they support, and giving them your money. They have a difficult time stating what their end goal is. Normally they'd say equality of the sexes and or ending sexism, but they are constantly inventing new forms of sexism and oppression that allows them to be forever relevant, and their actions show us that they are not for the equality of the sexes, but for the betterment of one sex in particular, women, because women are oppressed. Why? Well, because we say so. And that brings us to our first theory, patriarchy theory. Patriarchy theory is the idea that we live in a vast network of subtle social influences that belittle women and prop men up. This theory, of course, is hinged on evidence that consists of opinion, personal experience, and staring up at men currently in positions of high value. Patriarchy theory is just another theory that's far more concerned that people believe the conclusion as opposed to looking at the evidence and coming to their own conclusions. Patriarchy theory is pretty much confirmation bias incarnate, as it latches on to evidence that could possibly confirm a patriarchy and denies any and all evidence that would state the contrary. Let's say there are a group of 10 women discussing patriarchy theory, and they are hinging everything on personal experience. 5 of the women claim that they have experience with belittling because of the fact that they are women, and then that is taken to be evidence of a vast social system of female stigmatization. Then the other 5 women explain that they have never been belittled for being a woman, and even if they were, it was just in jest and there was no harm in it. Those women would be told, well, just because it didn't happen to you doesn't mean that it never happens. Just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean a lot of women haven't. This tactic could be used with any action, with any theory. Let's replace the belittling of women with bear attacks. Let's just assume that there were a group of people called anti-bearists claiming that we live in a beariarchy and that humans are under constant threat of bear attacks. People are more inclined to believe this if they've been a victim of a bear attack themselves, and so those people will tend to gather in the anti-bearist camp. Now let's make the situation analogous to the situation previously. 5 women in a room say they were attacked by bears, hence, evidence of a beariarchy. 5 women never attacked by a bear and in fact never felt like they were under threat. Just because it didn't happen to you doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Anything to maintain the conclusion. If feminists are going to claim that something is happening on a widespread societal scale, then they need to actually prove something is happening on a widespread societal scale. Instead, they collect all of the evidence for the proposition and conveniently dismiss all evidence against it. Confirmation bias incarnate. What I find simply amazing about feminists who tout around the patriarchy theory is that even when women claim that they don't see a patriarchy at work, feminists will claim that they totally are under a patriarchy. It's just so subtle that they're blind to it. But luckily, they have feminism to explain it to them. I have another theory as to why they need to claim things are so subtle that people can't see them, because they aren't there to begin with. Feminism is a lot like a modern social religion, considering it constantly claims different forms of sexism instead of bowing to fact. Religions often, when faced with evidence against the claims they make, will adapt their religion to fit the facts, not by accepting the facts as true, but by claiming that their God is far more complex than they expected. They invent different miracles in order to cope with what science has discovered. So long as their claim there is a God isn't damaged. This is remarkably similar to feminism and sexism. I'm not saying that sexism no longer exists because there are a minority of sexist people out there, but it is clearly not happening on as large a scale as feminists claim. In atheist circles, there's an argument recognized as the God of the gaps theory, in which religious people will take gaps in scientific knowledge and claim that those gaps must have been God because science isn't able to or hasn't yet figured it out. Just because someone doesn't know how something came to be or how something operates does not mean that your preconceived theory by default is correct until proven otherwise. This is seen often when talking about the wage gap with feminists. The debunked 77 cents on the dollar for the same work claim is still thrown around, and yet when you control for nearly every conceivable choice that men and women make, and some things are impossible to quantify, however, then the gap shrinks from 23 cents to a measly 4 to 7 cents. We still haven't figured out what causes this gap. A couple examples would be, well, discrimination, the fact that women seem to be worse at negotiating salaries, men take more initiative in negotiating salaries when it's made unclear that salaries are negotiable, payment based on quality and quantity of production, and on it goes. Yet feminists will say, aha, that 4 to 7 cents must be discrimination then because we haven't figured out what causes it. No. That is the feminists attempting to bust out a God of the gaps theory regarding the wage gap. So I guess it could be called a sexism of the gaps theory, if you will. Of course, feminists won't take this argument seriously, and they will just claim that there are still payment discrimination cases, and so that means that discrimination is still a part of that controlled wage gap, which is entirely true. However, that would mean that even if you have one case of payment discrimination, then you will technically have a wage gap. And so until you have 0 people discriminating, then the wage gap is still a big problem, and thus women are oppressed, and feminism is relevant. However, as I've said previously, even if we just pay women more than men, feminists would be satisfied for a little while, but then that payment will also be treated as a form of oppression, because what? Women are so incapable of success, they need a man's help to get ahead? You'll notice that female feminists will complain about things that benefit them as women, and yet not advocate those things be removed. Whenever someone brings up the draft, most feminists will claim, yeah, well, I don't support the draft at all. Well, isn't that lovely? Where's the last feminist protest decrying the draft? I'll wait. Yet they will use the draft as a form of female oppression, claiming that society treats women as objects or damsels in distress to be protected by men, and so that is why men are sent off to fight and women, quote-unquote, made to stay home. The more cynical and radical feminist will claim, well, all war was started by men, so even though that is demonstrably untrue, but notice how they use a man's actions to justify or cancel out another man's death. Even if you cite to them that men are 76% of murder victims, they will go on to claim that most murder is committed by men, as if that makes those deaths not count, and as if it makes the percentage disappear. I'll make sure to put "killed by a man" on their tombstones. I'm sure that'll comfort a lot of people. There isn't much to refute regarding standpoint theory, which is basically a very fancy way of saying you aren't oppressed, therefore you're incorrect. I am oppressed, and so I am correct, and my opinion should be valued above yours. Of course, this oppression is explained through the methods we've discussed previously, and so in reality their foundation is made of sand. Not even sand. It is made of water vapor. There is fat shaming, where if a man doesn't find fat women attractive, then he's a fat shaming asshole. Yet if a man does find fat women attractive, then he's fetishizing them and liking them only for their bodies and not who they are as people. This can be said along racial lines as well. I'm in an interracial relationship, and I generally find this theory appalling, but let's go over it really quickly. White men who don't find minority women attractive are racists. White men who find minority women attractive exclusively are fetishizing them. And white men who don't think race is an important factor when deciding who to sleep with is dismissing their identity. Because judging people on the content of their character instead of the color of their skin or gender is now something that racists and sexists do. There is no way to win that game but to not date anyone and not express an opinion on the subject, which is what they would like more than anything. Another example of feminist hypocrisy is the idea that we need to smash gender roles, and yet they still roll out a campaign called He for She, because the idea that women are capable adults who can protect themselves is out of the question. Men must protect the damsels in distress from other men, and then be derided as a sexist because benevolent sexism. Then there is the classic power plus prejudice argument, which basically says it's okay when I'm racist and sexist because of my skin color and gender, but not okay for you because of your skin color and gender, which is, of course, racist in itself. Since we've seen so many examples of feminists changing the rules to suit them, I think it would be safe to assume that the minute women and minorities gain the majority of power and remain prejudiced, they will change the rules to something along the lines of historical privilege plus prejudice, because we have to make sure our rationalizations keeping us from being racist and sexist are maintained, but we also maintain that your racism and sexism is still there. And they define others' actions as racist and or sexist whenever the hell they please, but if you disagree with their definition of racism, then you just aren't getting it, are a complete moron, and refuse to accept that you're a racist and or sexist. Another random instance of feminist hypocrisy is the UVA rape hoax, where a woman named Jackie made up completely a story about being gang raped, was believed wholeheartedly by the mainstream media, various other news outlets, and all of those protesters on the campus who vandalized the building, and also the school administration who suspended the frat over the incident. And then feminists turn around after her story was discredited and continue to ask the question, why don't we believe rape victims? And even though the rape claim was false, they're saying it doesn't matter if Jackie was lying, as long as we bring light to the college campus rape epidemic, then it's okay. It seems like in order to be a feminist, being a hypocrite is a fundamental prerequisite. Take what's happening in gaming, where third-wave feminists are trying to slander an entire community of people as misogynists, sexists, and promoting a violent atmosphere for women. No matter how much evidence they receive to the contrary, their assumption will remain in place. Anita Sarkeesian has been performing some impressive mental gymnastics to justify her theory that misogyny in gaming is rampant, and this is done by double binding. No matter what you do, you are always incorrect. Not enough women in action games? You're promoting the idea that women are weak and can't handle themselves. Women hurt in action games? This game promotes violence against women and is misogynistic. There is hardly any way to win. And even if Sarkeesian claims that you do win, then she'll go against the standards she set previously to lull developers into some sort of false sense of security, and then re-emerge with those previous standards to call the game a sexist piece of trash. Then, when Sarkeesian's Orwellian opinion, video games cause sexism, and the less you think you are affected, the more you are affected, is refuted by a well-researched study, then what do the supporters of Sarkeesian do? Do they admit that they were incorrect? Did they admit that Sarkeesian was wrong in her theory? No, of course not. They put forward the claim was never even made. And in fact, ignore Sarkeesian's theories now that they've been proven incorrect, or at least the hypothesis has been tested and no evidence has been found for such a claim, and focus on all of the harassment. Now we're going to quietly shift from gamers are a bunch of sexists to gamers are a bunch of harassers. Screw it. Let's just keep calling them misogynists. No one will notice. They are erasing their own memory, or are actively ignoring it. They are mind-killing themselves, as Arthur Chu stated. And that is one of the most dangerous aspects of modern feminism. You are always breaking the rules. Their claims are unfalsifiable. If they are falsifiable in some way, and they are falsified, then we need to erase that from our memory, because fighting the good fight is far more important than being correct about reality. Have a wonderful day.